Shalom everyone, hope everyone's doing well. Zat Hashem, today in Masechet Sanhedrin, we're going to continue on Chaf Aleph Amud Aleph. We'll be starting about halfway down the page, the last narrow line, or last middle line on the page, Hanish Monasle Minalan. So it's about halfway down, the last narrow line before the lines get wide. And Bezrat Hashem, we're going to have a discussion today trying to pinpoint the source for this number of 18. We said that the king is allowed to have up to 18 wives. We had a machloket yesterday. Does that mean because if they're wicked wives, he can't have more, like Rabbi Yehuda said, or even righteous wives, like Abigail, he can't have more, as Rabbi Shimon. But either way, 18 seem to be agreed upon. So the Gemara wants to know, what is the source for this ruling that he can't have more than 18? That lo yarbe lo nashim refers to 18 wives. Reminder that Bezrat Hashem, our learning should be as a zechut for refuah shlema, a speedy, full recovery for Yaakov ben Dinah, and we should hear b'sarot tovot. Let's see. So the Gemara says like this: Hanish Shmona Esrei Minalan. Where do we know this idea that a king can't have more than 18 wives? When it says lo yarbe lo nashim, he shouldn't have an increased number of wives, it means more than 18. So the Gemara tells us that this is actually based on a story with Dovid HaMelech, Techtiv. It says regarding Dovid HaMelech, now we know in the initial stage of Dovid HaMelech's career, he ruled in Hebron, and then eventually he was appointed in Yerushalayim. So when he was in Hebron, it says, Vayivaldu leDavid banim bechevron, that children were born to David in Hebron, and it goes through the children and their mothers. We're going to see he had 6 wives listed in the Pasuk, in Hebron. It says, Vayhi bechoro Amnon, his oldest child was Amnon, la'achinoam Yisraelit, who was born to the mother, that was his wife number 1, we could call it, Achinoam the Yisraelit. Umishneu, in the second child, Kilav. Kilav was born la'Avigail, Eshet Naval HaKarmeli. Was born to the second wife, which is Avigail, who used to be the wife of Naval HaKarmeli. David married her after Naval passed away. That's a story in and of itself. Zat Hashem will talk about it a different time. Vashlishi, the third child, was Avshalom ben Ma'acha. Was Avshalom, famous Avshalom, rebelled against his father, and he was the son of a woman named Ma'acha. Varavi'i, the fourth child, Adoniah ben Chagit, was the one child called Adoniah. He also rebelled against David, happens to be. He was the son of a woman named Chagit. Vachamishi, the fifth child, Shefatia ben Abital. Shefatia, who was the son of the woman named Abital. Vashishi, and the sixth child was Yitraam le'Eglah. Was Yitraam born to Eglah, who was Eshet David, the wife of David. Pasuk finishes off, Eila Yaldu le David bechevron. These were born to David in Hebron. So it lists 6 children, each one born to a different mother, because David had 6 wives, at least as listed in Hebron, and therefore we see that David had 6 wives. That's the point. V'ka'amr le Navi, and the Navi we find, it's later in Shmuel Bet, it's a Parakid Bet, it says that the Navi, Natana Navi, tells David, Ime'at, if this is too minimal for you, ve'osifa lecha, keywords, kahena v'chahena. So the Navi said, I will add on, means you could have more wives, kahena v'chahena. So the way we're interpreting like this and like this, it means you have 6 wives, so you could have another 6, like the 6 you have, and another 6. 6 plus 6 plus 6, or 6 times 3, is 18. So then it would appear, says the Gemara, that the maximum amount of wives David and future Jewish kings could have is up to 18. That's the proof. Let's read that inside. Kahena is shit. Kahena is 6, v'kahena shit, and kahena is another 6. Tahav v'lahu tamnei srei, which is a total of 18. So from this we deduce that David was allowed to have up to 18 wives, and similarly, future Jewish kings could have also up to 18 wives. So the Gemara now poses 2 levels of a question. Matkif la Ravina. Ravina says, this proof seems to be a little bit lacking logically, because maybe I'll read the kahena v'kahena as follows. Maybe kahena is tarti srei. Okay, it's true. Kahena means another 6, meaning is that just like you have 6, so you could have another 6, which would be a total of 12. Vikahena, but then when it says, and like this, it doesn't mean to double the original number of 6, but it means to double the total number that we've found now, which is 12, which means Esrin va'arba. Maybe he can have up to 24 wives, actually. So again, he originally had 6. Kahena means another 6, which would be 12. And then the third step, which would be the second kahena, says, just like you could have up to 12, you could actually double that and have up to 24. And then it would emerge that David was allowed to have 24. And the Gemara says, indeed, there is such a Tana that exists like this. Who learns the pasuk that way? Tanya nami hachi. There is a braita that supports this. Lo yarbelo nashim. He shouldn't increase his number of wives. Yoter me'esrim v'arba. And actually, this braita learns, this Tana holds, can't have more than 24. And the way he explains it is exactly like we said, which means that the first of all, he had 6. Then it says kahena, it's another 6, which is 12. Double that with the second kahena is 24. That's the maximum amount of wives that a king is allowed to have. So the Gemara says, well, we could even take this a step further, really, which would not be like our Tana of our Mishnah. Because Leman de Darish Vav, we do have a Tana in Shas who expounds the Vav. We had this earlier, actually. We learned about this. We actually learned that it depends on the context sometimes. But according to the Shita who darshans the Vav, who expounds the Vav, so it says kahena vikahena. So the vikahena, the Vav with the second kahena, could also be expounded for a drasha in terms of the number of wives that David was allowed to have. So if so, the way you should read it is like this. The first kahena teaches us, just like there were 6, you can have double that, which would be 12. The Vav of Vikahena could teach us that you could have double whatever that number was, which would mean double 12 and now it's 24. And then the second Kahena would teach us you could actually have double the total you've already accumulated, which is now a total of 48. So then it would emerge, says the Gemara, Laman de Darish Vav, according to the Shita who expounds Vav throughout Shas, Arba'im v'shmona havu. So you should actually have a total of 48. David should have been allowed to marry 48, and a king should be allowed to. 48. So the Gemara says, Enochinami, yes, indeed there is such a Shita who learns the verses that way, and will deduce that a king can have 48 wives. Tani nami hachi, there is a braita that supports this. It says, Lo yarbel lo nashim, he should not increase the number of wives, and the way this Tana explains, Yoter marba'im v'shmona, he can't have more than 48. So actually there is such a Shita, and that would emerge that there's 2 other Shitot. One Shita holds he could have a total of 24, and the other Shita holds he could have a total of 48. So the Gemara pulls it back now. Okay, but our Tana holds you can only have a total of 18. So how does he know to expound the verse, Kahena v'chena, 6 plus another 6, meaning a total of 18? The Tana didan my time. What's the reasoning of our Tana that holds he can only have up to 18? So Kahana makish Kahena batra le Kahena kama, because he compares the latter Kahena to the earlier Kahena. It means the second v'chahena, he expounds that it's comparable. Hekish, it's comparable and therefore similar to the first kahena. Ma kahena kama sheet, just as the first kahena only adds 6, Av kahena batra, so the latter kahena sheet adds only another 6. So therefore our Tana says, you add 6 from the first kahena, 6 from the second kahena, it's a total of 18. That's how we know that a king shouldn't marry more than 18. That's what it means, lo yarbelo nashim. Okay, beautiful. Says the Gemara, but the problem is that in that pasuk we listed the names of 6 wives, but actually we know there was another wife that's not listed seemingly, that was married to David. And her name was Michal bat Shaul, which we learned about on Chaf Amud Bet, that even according to the Shita who says he wasn't married to Meirav, the older daughter of Shaul, but everyone agrees that Michal bat Shaul was married to David, but she's not listed in that pasuk. Now, if that's the case, it throws off the number, because now it should emerge he was actually married to 7 women, and this was earlier in Chevron. So then when it says Kahina v'chayini, you should be doubling 7, and it actually should come out to a total of 21, not a total of 18. So the Gemara says, right, because 7 plus 7 plus 7 is 21. Means it would mean you're adding another 3 to the number of 18. Asks the Gemara, have Michal, but he was also married to Michal, and therefore we know that he would have. Why is she listed in the pasuk? It must be that there was actually a total of 7 wives, and then it shouldn't be 18. So the Gemara says, Amarav Egla zu Michal, the 6th wife that's listed in the pasuk we quoted above in Shmuel Bet Gimel. Egla is actually Michal. Egla is not her real name; she is called Egla. V'lama nikra shma Egla. Why was she called Egla? Shechaviva alav ke'Egla. It was a term of endearment. She was dear to David like an egla. An egla is like a little calf. Now, I think that might today be considered an insult if you call your wife a little calf. But apparently back then in the day, I don't know, maybe there's a Persian expression. It's interesting. Yesterday I was giving a class and one of the older Persian fellows told me, Persian expressions, a lot of chokhmah there. So maybe you call your wife a calf, that's a Persian expression. I don't know. But it's a term of endearment, bekitzer. And therefore the Gemara says, that's why Eglah actually was Michal. So there are 6 wives that David had in Hebron, and the calculation works out fine. Where else do we find that Eglah is used by a person as a term of endearment? Like it says in Shoftim. When it says regarding Shimshon, we know Shimshon, he had a strategy with the Plishtim to diminish their numbers, that he would create a fake personal battle with them, as if there was some personal offense, and then take out his anger by killing them out. And in this way, the Plishtim would not fall back on the Jewish people because they saw Shimshon as the Jews' representative, but rather it was personal. And then he was able to diminish the enemies of the Jews that way. One of the ways he did that was by marrying non-Jewish women, Plishti women, which he's taken to task for. The Gemara in Sotah discusses this extensively. But either way, he had a cheshbon l'shem shamayim l'chora. And when it comes to one of the women that he married, it says he married one of those women and he gave a riddle to the Plishtim that were there. And if they could figure it out, then he would have to give them certain items. So what ended up happening was the woman that he had just married provided the answer to the riddle because she knew it. And it says in the pasuk there, V'chenu Omer, and he got upset, he killed them out. Long story. V'chenu Omer, and the pasuk says in Shoftim regarding Shimshon, Lule charashtem be'eglati v'gomer. If you wouldn't have plowed my calf, you wouldn't have figured out the riddle. Now what it means is, you wouldn't have plied her trying to figure out what the answer was, you wouldn't have figured it out. But we see he referred to his wife as an eglah, as a calf. Fine. Says the Gemara, okay, you want to tell me that 6th wife, Eglah, was Michal. The problem is, did Michal have children? We know the pasuk tells us, and this is in Shmuel Bet, Perik Vav. There was an episode where David HaMelech had the Aron HaKodesh brought back to Yerushalayim, and he was so excited about this with the Simcha Shel Mitzvah that he danced with all of his strength in front of the Aron HaKodesh, like somebody on Simchat Torah. But this was the king of the Jewish people. Imagine the Gadol Ador, the greatest person of the nation, and he's dancing with all of his energy, dancing in such a way. So Michal, his wife, looks out the window and sees this, and she denigrates him. She thinks he's acting in a way that's not befitting of the king. So the pasuk says that after that, because she denigrated him in such a way, he actually responds and says, I would even do more. I think the lashon of the pasuk is unkaloti od mizot, if I remember correctly. It says, I would even dance with more energy in front of Hashem, because this is actually avodat Hashem. This is not denigrating, it's the opposite. It's honorable. And therefore, she was punished because she denigrated David. It says, Ulamichal bat Shaul lo haya lavlad ad yom mota. She did not bear children till the day of her death. So it seems to be she didn't have children, but that verse that we quoted in the beginning said that this Eglah had a child, and therefore it can't be that his name was Yitram, and therefore it can't be that this Michal is Eglah. So Rav Chizda says, maybe we could answer, Ad Yom Motah Lo Hayala. It's true. Until the day she died, she didn't have a child, but B'Yom Motah Hayala. But by the day she died, on the day she died, she gave birth. So it sounds like she died in childbirth. That's what it means. So it says in the pasuk, she didn't have children till the day she died. It means on the day she died, she did have a children. The Gemara says that's not true. Because Mechti, let's analyze this. Banim Eicha Kachashivlu B'Chevron. In the pasuk we quoted in the onset, it was when David ruled in Chevron. And it says that this Eglah had a child, Yitra'am. That was before the incident in Yerushalayim. The incident in Yerushalayim with Michal, where she was cursed not to have children, was actually in Yerushalayim. As it says, Michal bat Shaul nishkefa ba'ara chalon. She gazed out of the window and saw David dancing. Vateret hamelech David mefazez umcharkel lifnei Hashem. She saw David dancing with all of his energy in front of Hashem, in front of the Aron that was being brought back to Yerushalayim. Vativaz, and she denigrated him. So V'amar Rav Yehuda, Rav Yosef, and so Rav Yehuda or Rav Yosef explain, Shakalta Michal lemitrafsa, that Michal took her punishment, meaning that based on that incident in Yerushalayim, she was punished and she didn't have children anymore. So what you see is that it seems to be Eglah can't be Michal, because if it was Michal, she would have had a child previously. And yet the pasuk here seems to say that she didn't have a child until the day of her death. So to tell me on the day of her death that's when she had a child, that wouldn't be calculating in this Yitram who was born in Chevron. So Ela so the Gemara says, rather, perhaps the pshat is, Ad oto ma'aseh hayala. Really what it means is, until the story in Yerushalayim, she had this child, Yitra'am. Mikan ve'elech lo hayala. But it means, from then on, she wouldn't have a child. Some Mefarshim here learn it means, actually her child died. Others learn, no, she just didn't have more children. But either way, it could be this Eglah was the same identity as Michal. And therefore, there were 6 wives, and 666 is 18. That's the source for the number of 18 that a king is allowed to have. Beautiful. Asks the Gemara, but the problem is, v'hachtiv, but before the verse that lists his 6 wives, and then we know it's tripled by kahena v'kahena. It says, vayikach David od pilagshim v'nashim b'Yerushalayim. It says he took more wives and pilagshim, which are concubines. We'll explain in a moment the distinction between that, in Yerushalayim. So the Gemara says, what do you see? It seems to be that there were more wives than the 6 that he had calculated, that the Pasuk had calculated, because this is Perek Hey in Shmuel Bet. And the previous verse that listed the 6 wives that we mentioned by name, that was Shmuel Bet Perek Gimel. So this is listed after, which means it would seem to be that after he married those 6 wives, he married more, and then kahena v'kahena would actually multiply it by however many wives he has, and it wouldn't be a total of 18, it would be more than that. So the Gemara answers, even though it's listed after the 6 wives, which would seem to multiply to the number of more than 18, but limlu yesh monasa, really it means those were the ones that were allowed to, he married, allowable to the number of 18. Means even though it's listed after, really it could be that those were part of the number of 18 that he married in addition to his other wives, not as the original list of 6 that we had calculated, additional ones, to fulfill the number of 18 that is permissible for him. Asks the Gemara, and we'll finish off with this, my nashim umay pilagshim. What is the difference between wives and pilagshim? Pilagshim is concubines. So that's a word we use in English, but what's the difference in halacha? Nashim b'ktuva u'v'kiddushin. Wives, regular wives, the marriage is accomplished through ktuva, which is the document that tells us the responsibilities of the husband to his wife, u'v'kiddushin, as well as through kiddushin, which is the first stage of marriage that creates the kedusha, the holiness in the marriage, and the isur of eshet ish that's applicable to the woman. Pilagshim, regarding Pilagshim, the Girsa of our Gemara is Velo Ktuva uvelo Kiddushin. It's a marriage of sorts. The concubines is a marriage of sorts that's accomplished without Ktuva and without Kiddushin. Means he doesn't have the legal responsibilities to her like a regular husband, no Ktuva, and also there's no Kiddushin that triggers this type of a marriage. That's the Girsa of our Gemara. Now it's actually a Machloket Rishonim. If at face value, which seems to be how the Rambam learns, if it's pilegesh without ketuvah and without kiddushin, other Rishonim learn differently that it's without ketuvah, but it's without ketuvah, but it has kiddushin. Others learn, I believe Rashi al Torah learns that way, and other Rishonim, I believe the Ravad, I believe, says such a vort. So therefore, our Gemara comes out, either way you learn, there is this fundamental distinction between what we call nashim and pilagshim. We're going to stop here. About 15 lines from the bottom of Chaf Aleph Amud Aleph. We'll pick up tomorrow, God willing, continuing to discuss the descendants of David HaMelech. In the meantime, I wish everybody a wonderful day.